There are seasons in life when pain feels like an uninvited guest that refuses to leave. You wake up and it's there, quietly sitting beside your bed, waiting to walk with you into another day. It lingers in your chest when you breathe. It hides behind your smile when people ask how you are. Pain for many is not a moment but a companion. It is easy then to believe that God watches from a distance, indifferent to your tears, measuring your faith by your ability to endure without breaking. But this could not be further from the truth. God does not sit as a stern judge over your pain. He bends low and enters it with you. When you cry in the silence of your room, He does not look away, He draws closer. The world teaches us to equate strength with stoicism, as if the absence of tears were a mark of faith. Yet the divine heart is moved not by our perfection, but by our honesty. When you weep, He does not see weakness. He sees a child reaching upward, seeking comfort from a father who never left. There is a strange beauty in realizing that the very moments you feel furthest from God are often the ones in which He is closest, standing quietly in the shadows, not condemning you for your brokenness, but wrapping Himself around it. Pain has a way of distorting how we see ourselves. We begin to think we are failing because we are feeling. We imagine that faith means smiling through the storm, that holiness means hiding our wounds. But in truth, the act of being human is sacred. Every tear that falls is not evidence of faith lost, but love alive. God is not repelled by your suffering. He is not embarrassed by your trembling voice or your unanswered questions. He does not measure your worth by the steadiness of your hands, but by the sincerity of your heart. If He wanted perfection, He would have made angels, not souls that bleed and yet still believe. There is a whisper that moves through the pages of Scripture and through the quiet of the human heart. I am with you. Not I will fix you immediately, not I will erase every ache, but I am with you. Presence, not punishment, is His first response to pain. He does not rush to correct the emotion, He honors it. Because pain is not rebellion, it is revelation. It reveals what we love, what we fear, what we long for. It opens the soul to light it didn't know it needed. And in that sacred exposure, God steps in, not as a critic, but as a comforter. Imagine a parent watching their child cry after falling to the ground. The parent does not stand over the child, scolding them for being hurt. They kneel, they lift, they hold. That is the heart of God toward you. He is not ashamed of your scars. He is not counting your tears as failure marks. He counts them as prayers. For every sigh you release into the air, He interprets as a language of the soul that only heaven understands. When you think you are drowning in despair, He is already beneath the waters, holding you up. When you think you are forgotten, He is the memory that never fades. Many people spend their lives running from pain, fearing that to feel deeply is to lose control. But perhaps the real courage is to stop running and allow yourself to be held within it, to let God meet you there. There is something profoundly divine about the embrace of suffering when it is met with love. Pain, when shared with God, loses its poison. It may still hurt, but it cannot destroy. It transforms instead into wisdom, into tenderness, into the kind of strength that does not shout, but endures quietly, with grace. If you have ever felt unworthy because of your sorrow, remember this: even the Son wept. Even the most faithful have cried out in confusion. The holiest prayers are not always spoken in churches or written in perfect language. They are the wordless groans that rise from the heart in the middle of the night. And God, who knows the music of silence, hears them all. He is not waiting for you to be fine before He loves you. He loves you into being fine. So when your soul feels heavy, when life feels like too much, and your faith feels too small, don't hide. Speak to him as you are. Cry if you must. Sit in silence if words fail. He does not despise your pain. He sanctifies it. What you call brokenness, he calls becoming. What you call loss, he calls transformation. Every ache in your heart is a door through which he enters more fully. There will come a day when you will look back and see that your tears watered the soil of your own resurrection. You will understand that his embrace was not to remove the pain, but to redeem it. Because in his presence, even pain has purpose. You were never judged for your suffering. You were loved through it. It's the silence after a storm, when the world goes quiet and you realize that no one around you truly sees what you carry. People might notice your tired eyes or your faint smile, but they cannot feel the weight sitting inside your chest. In those moments, you begin to wonder if even God has turned his face away. It's easy to imagine him standing far above the clouds, watching from a safe distance while you stumble through the shadows below. Yet the truth is far more intimate and tender. He does not observe your pain from afar, he walks into it with you. He does not analyze your suffering. He enters it, breathes within it, and fills the hollow space you thought no one could ever touch. When life wounds you deeply, when betrayal cuts through trust, when loss steals the meaning from your days, you may ask, where is God in this? The question itself is sacred because it comes from a soul still reaching, still believing that somewhere there must be love behind the chaos. God does not despise that question. He answers it not with explanations but with presence. His silence in your suffering is not absence, it's depth. It's the language of a God who chooses to sit beside you in the darkness rather than shout from the light. He understands that comfort does not come from words alone, but from the quiet assurance that you are not alone. Think of a child who falls and scrapes their knee. The parent doesn't lecture the child about balance or fault. They don't demand composure. They kneel down, lift the child into their arms and simply hold them. The pain doesn't vanish immediately, but in that embrace something shifts. The child's sobs soften because love has entered the space where pain once ruled. That is what God does with your sorrow. He kneels into your humanity. He doesn't stand above it. His divinity does not make him distant. It makes him deeply present. His love does not remove the ache, but transforms the way it is carried. There are sacred moments unseen by the world when your tears fall like prayers that have no language. In those moments you may feel invisible, but heaven does not miss a single drop. Each tear is recorded, not as evidence of despair, but as testimony of endurance. When you can no longer form words, your pain becomes your prayer, and God listens to that language perfectly. He bends closer to the heart that cannot speak, for he knows that silence often contains more truth than sound ever could. His compassion is not theoretical, it is experiential. He does not stand outside your sorrow, waiting for you to emerge purified. He enters it, sanctifies it, and makes it a place of meeting. Many people believe they must be strong to find God, as if faith were the reward for those who never waver, but it is often the opposite. God's nearness is felt most profoundly when you are stripped of strength, when all you can do is whisper his name through trembling lips. That is when his embrace becomes real. He does not ask you to perform faith, he asks you to bring your truth. The broken, unfiltered truth, because he knows that healing begins not in the act of pretending, but in the courage of revealing. He embraces not the version of you that has it all together, but the one who has fallen apart. You may not see him, but he is in the quiet gestures that hold you up, the unexpected kindness of a stranger, the warmth that floods your heart in prayer, the small sense of peace that visits without reason. These are not coincidences. They are footprints of a God who moves gently through your pain. He does not demand your smile before he arrives. He enters the sadness itself and breathes life where despair once lived. The light you feel in the darkest places of your soul, it is not accidental. It is him, reminding you that even darkness is not dark to him. What separates divine compassion from human comfort is this: people may try to understand, but God already does. He doesn't require you to explain the complexity of your emotions. He feels them with you. When you are angry, he does not retreat. When you doubt, he does not condemn. When you grieve, he grieves with you. This is the mystery of divine empathy. He is both the healer and the one who feels the wound. He is both the comforter and the one who weeps beside you. To say that God is present in pain is not poetic exaggeration, it is spiritual truth. His presence may not erase what hurts, but it transforms what it means. Pain ceases to be punishment and becomes a pathway that leads you not to despair, but to deeper awareness of love. Love that does not vanish when life breaks, but proves itself within the breaking. He is there, holding your trembling hands even when you cannot feel his touch. And when the night seems endless, when prayers return unanswered and hope flickers weakly in your chest, he is whispering softly, "I am still here." You may not see the miracle in the moment, but someday you'll look back and realize your survival was his embrace all along. Every breath you took when you thought you couldn't go on was him breathing with you. Every step you made through your sorrow was him carrying you unseen. God never judged you for your pain. He simply chose to sit in it with you until love became stronger than the hurt. There is an unspoken lie many people carry within them, the belief that tears are a sign of weakness, that crying means failure, that faith should always look like calmness and control. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. Tears are not weakness. They are proof that the heart is still alive, still capable of love, still reaching for meaning in the midst of chaos. Your tears are not moments of defeat. They are sacred expressions of your humanity. God does not turn away from your tears. He treasures them. Every tear that falls from your eyes is seen. Every sigh you release into the silence is heard. To him your tears are not a symbol of despair, but a language of trust, because only those who believe that someone listens dare to cry. We live in a world that worships composure. Society teaches us to keep our emotions hidden, to smile when we're breaking, to appear strong even when our spirit is crumbling. We learn to equate silence with maturity and numbness with peace. But God does not call the emotionless strong. He calls the honest courageous. He is not impressed by those who bury their pain to appear faithful. He draws near to those who dare to feel, to those who dare to admit, "I am not okay." When you cry, you are not losing faith, you are revealing it. Because to weep is to surrender, to let go of control, and to trust that there is something holy in being seen exactly as you are. When God looks at your tears, he does not see shame, he sees purity. He does not ask you to hide them, he collects them. In his eyes, your tears are like seeds. They fall into the ground of your soul, and in time they will grow into wisdom, compassion, and strength. There are lessons that only tears can teach. There are truths that only pain can reveal. And there is a depth of closeness with God that only opens when the heart breaks open. The tears you shed in solitude are not wasted. They water the roots of your faith, even when you cannot see the growth yet. Think about the times you've tried to hold back your tears, believing that crying would make you look weak in front of others. Yet those same moments are often the ones when your spirit longs most for comfort. The tears you suppress do not disappear. They wait, and when they finally fall, They carry with them a lifetime of unsaid prayers. God meets you there not as a critic, but as a comforter. He doesn't ask why you waited so long to release them. He simply receives them as a child's cry for home. And every time your voice breaks, heaven listens. Tears are sacred because they come from the soul, not the mind. They bypass all reasoning, all defense, all pride. They are the body's confession that something inside hurts too deeply for words, and that is exactly where God chooses to dwell, in the spaces words cannot reach. He does not need explanations or polished prayers. He understands the trembling of your breath, the shaking of your hands, the exhaustion that hides behind your smile. His heart moves at the sound of your sobs. To the world they may sound like pain, but to God they sound like worship. Because you are coming to Him, not pretending to be whole, but offering Him the truth of your brokenness. You are never smaller in His eyes for crying. In fact, you are most like His image when you allow yourself to feel. Even the most divine moments in history were soaked in tears. Sorrow and holiness often walk together, for the heart that can feel deeply is the one that can love deeply, and love is the language of heaven. So when you cry out of grief or guilt or longing, you are speaking heaven's language without even knowing it. God does not see your tears as failure. He sees them as faith in motion. Faith that says, I still believe you are listening. Faith that says, even in this pain, I still trust you're near. Sometimes the tears will not stop. Sometimes they will come in waves, unexpected and overwhelming. That's okay. Don't rush to silence them. Let them fall into His hands. Let them cleanse the soul that has carried too much. Each tear is a release, a soft surrender to the one who knows your story better than you do. You may not see it now, but your tears are washing away the fragments of fear and doubt that have attached themselves to your spirit. They are creating space for peace to return. When you stand before God in your most fragile state, eyes swollen and heart heavy, you are not an object of pity. You are a masterpiece in progress. The cracks you see in yourself are places where His light enters. He does not expect you to always stand strong. He delights in being your strength when you can't. The tears you think make you look weak are the very things that draw His compassion closer. In the divine view, strength is not the absence of tears. It is the courage to let them fall while still choosing to trust. It is faith that trembles but does not die. It is the quiet act of saying, even though I don't understand, I will not hide. And in that honesty something sacred happens. The tears that once felt like surrender become the beginning of healing. God doesn't judge them. He blesses them, because your tears, in all their pain and beauty, are the proof that love still lives inside you. And where love lives, God is always near. Pain often feels like punishment. When life falls apart, when loss takes what you love, or when betrayal leaves you shattered, the first thought that creeps into your mind is, did I do something wrong? You start to search for reasons, trying to make sense of suffering. But pain is not a divine verdict. It is a revelation. It does not mean you have failed. It means you are being refined. God does not use pain to condemn. He uses it to awaken. What you call punishment, heaven calls preparation. Pain is not proof of God's anger. It is often proof of His attention. Pain, in its purest form, is a teacher disguised as chaos. It doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to show you what you could not see in comfort. When everything is easy, we move through life without reflection, without depth, without gratitude. But when pain enters, it strips away illusions. It forces you to confront what truly matters. You learn who your real friends are. You learn how fragile pride can be. You learn that joy is not found in control, but in surrender. Pain takes you into the interior of your own soul, into places you've long avoided, and there, it introduces you to God in ways peace never could. There is something sacred about suffering that the world cannot understand. We are taught to escape it, to numb it, to avoid it at all costs. But the divine does not fear pain. It transforms it. Pain becomes revelation, because it opens the heart to truth. When your plans crumble, you learn that security was never in the plan, but in the presence that carries you. When your heart breaks, you discover that love was never meant to be possessed. It was meant to be shared. When you lose everything you thought you needed, you realize how little you actually need to live in grace. Every tear becomes a mirror, reflecting your soul back to you, showing what is false, what is real, and what must be released. Pain humbles the proud. It silences the noise of arrogance and ambition. It reminds us that we are not invincible, that we are dust and breath, fragile and fleeting. But it is in that humility that wisdom begins. Pain teaches dependence, not on people, not on possessions, but on God Himself. It turns your prayers from rehearsed words into raw cries of the heart. It strips away the mask of self-sufficiency and reveals a child reaching for the hand of the Father. In that reaching, revelation dawns. You were never meant to carry everything alone. There is beauty hidden inside the suffering you curse. Every heartbreak exposes a deeper hunger for love that the world cannot satisfy. Every disappointment removes a layer of false hope that blocked you from divine joy. What looks like destruction is often reconstruction. God allows certain pains not to hurt you, but to heal you from illusions that would have destroyed you later. Pain is His way of bringing to light the disease of the soul, the pride, the fear, the bitterness that quietly kills from within. It is not cruelty, it is mercy disguised as hardship. You see, revelation rarely comes in comfort. When life is soft and predictable, you stop asking questions. But when it breaks you open, you start searching, and that search, those sleepless nights, those moments of doubt, those trembling prayers, that is where God reveals Himself most intimately. He does not stand on mountaintops shouting truth into your comfort. He whispers it in the valley of tears. When you lose what you thought you couldn't live without, He shows you that life is sustained not by what you hold, but by who holds you. If you look closely, you'll see that pain and love are not enemies. They are intertwined. Love makes you feel deeply, and feeling deeply means you will eventually hurt deeply. But the same heart that breaks is also the one that can heal. The revelation of pain is this: you are more resilient than you believe, more loved than you imagine, and more connected to the divine than you think. Pain exposes this truth by burning away everything that tells you otherwise. When God allows pain, He is not judging your worth, He is revealing your potential. Like fire refining gold, He removes what is impure to expose what is eternal. The process is hard, because transformation is not gentle. It demands surrender. But in time, the same pain that once felt unbearable will become the story of how you discovered your strength, how you learned to hear His voice in the silence, how you finally understood that His grace is not found in the absence of suffering, but in the presence of meaning within it. So when the storm rages, when your heart feels too heavy, and the questions keep coming, remember this: pain is not rebellion, it's revelation. It is life's way of turning you back toward what truly matters. Do not run from it. Sit with it. Let it speak. It will tell you where healing is needed, where forgiveness must grow, where faith must rise. Because when all else falls away, pain reveals the one thing that remains unshaken, God's presence. And once you've met Him there, even your deepest wounds will begin to shine with the quiet light of understanding. You were never being punished. You were being transformed. When you are hurting, the first instinct is to ask why. Why did this happen? Why me? Why now? And yet, God's first response is rarely an explanation. It is presence. When you cry out in the night, He doesn't send a thunderous voice to justify your suffering. He comes near in silence. He does not rush to correct the emotion. He honors it. Because the divine heart knows that pain cannot always be solved. It must first be soothed. His love doesn't always remove what hurts. It sits beside you until the hurt begins to make sense. You see, human compassion often tries to fix what is broken. We want solutions, not silence. We want answers that make pain logical, but God is not a mechanic patching up souls. He is a father holding a weeping child. He doesn't offer quick repairs. He offers Himself. That is what presence means, not distant sympathy, but divine participation. When your chest tightens with grief, He feels it too. When your breath shortens under fear, He breathes with you. When you fall to your knees in despair, He kneels beside you. You may not hear His voice, but you are surrounded by it. The voice that speaks not in words, but in warmth, in stillness, in peace that refuses to leave. People often think of God as one who reacts to suffering, but the truth is He enters before you even call. When the storm of loss first begins to form, He is already in its center. His response is never delayed because He is not outside your pain. He is within it. Every tear you shed becomes a prayer. He answers with closeness. That is His language. Not punishment, not distance, but presence. A presence that is gentle enough to comfort and strong enough to carry. There are moments when pain isolates you from the world. Friends don't understand. Family grows silent, and words start to lose meaning. That's when you discover something holy. God doesn't need explanations to find you. He knows how to enter the cracks of your heart without knocking. He knows how to sit in the silence without demanding a smile. And when everyone else withdraws because your sadness is too heavy, He stays, not to demand your strength, but to remind you that His is enough. It's easy to believe that God's love means He will fix everything quickly, that His care must translate into miracles. But divine love is deeper than instant relief. It is patient. It is present, and it transforms instead of erases. If He removed every pain, you would never learn how vast His comfort can be. If He shielded you from every storm, you would never know how steady His hand feels when the waves rise. Sometimes His greatest mercy is not in removing the battle, but in revealing Himself as your shield through it. His presence is not the absence of pain. It is the promise that pain will never have the final word. Think about the times you felt completely undone, the grief that hollowed your chest, the loneliness that made time slow down. Remember how something unexplainable sustained you, how even in your weakness you somehow stood. That was not coincidence. That was not resilience alone. That was Him. You may have thought you survived by your own strength, but divine presence was holding the fragments of your soul together when you didn't even know how to breathe. Hitka yumi faba out of en quano. Pain often tempts you to believe that God is silent, but silence does not mean absence. Silence is His way of speaking in frequencies that only the broken can hear. His comfort is not always emotional. Sometimes it's simply endurance. The fact that you woke up again, that you took one more breath, that your heart still beats despite it all, that is His response. He doesn't always say, "It will end soon." Sometimes he says, I am here. You will not face it alone. God's presence is the most powerful response to human pain because it changes the nature of suffering without denying its reality. He does not belittle your emotions or demand you to have more faith. Instead, he sanctifies the very place where you stand. What feels like ashes to you becomes sacred ground to him. Every moment you thought you were abandoned was in truth the moment you were being held, the invisible warmth, the subtle calm, the sudden peace amid chaos. All of it is his signature, reminding you that he doesn't fix pain from the outside, he transforms it from within. To be embraced by God in suffering is to realize that his comfort is not conditional. It is not reserved for the strong or the worthy. It is freely given to the broken, to the weary, to the trembling soul that has no strength left to pray. He does not require perfect faith to be present. His presence itself gives birth to faith. The more you allow him into your sorrow, the less power that sorrow holds over you. So when the weight feels unbearable, stop looking for reasons and start listening for his nearness. You'll find him in the pauses between your sobs, in the air that still fills your lungs, in the quiet knowing that even if nothing makes sense, you are still loved. That is God's first response to pain, not judgment, not distance, but presence. He doesn't rush to fix the wound. He stays until it becomes sacred, because in his eyes the place where you hurt most deeply is often the very place where his glory begins to shine. One of the cruelest lies pain tells you is that you are worth less because you're hurting, that somehow, if you were stronger, wiser, or more faithful, you wouldn't be in this position. It whispers that your suffering is proof of your inadequacy, that your brokenness disqualifies you from being loved or blessed. But this is not how God sees you. Suffering does not define your worth. The depth of your pain does not measure the depth of your value. In fact, your pain often becomes the canvas upon which God paints the evidence of his love. When you're in agony, emotional, mental, or spiritual, you start to believe you've failed God. You think, if I had more faith, maybe this wouldn't hurt so much. But faith was never about pretending you're invincible. Faith is the courage to keep believing while you're bleeding. It's not the denial of pain. It's the decision to trust through it. God never demanded you be unshakable. He only asked you to remain reachable. You are not less loved because you are struggling. You are not less spiritual because you cry. Pain doesn't make you unworthy. It makes you human. And being human is the very thing God delights in redeeming. God's love does not fluctuate with your emotions. When your joy is high, he is with you. When your hope fades and you can barely lift your head, he is still with you. You could fall into the deepest valley of despair, and his love would still surround you. Not because you earned it, but because it is who he is. He does not measure your worth by your strength, but by your belonging. And you belong to him, even in your darkest night. When life is falling apart, you may be tempted to see your pain as divine rejection. Yet God never abandons the wounded. He moves closer to the broken-hearted. In a world that celebrates those who seem strong and unshaken, God draws near to those who tremble. The world might ignore your tears, but heaven keeps record of each one. Your pain is not invisible. It is sacred in the sight of the one who counts every step. The same God who sculpted the stars bends low to touch the heart that feels forgotten. You are not defined by what you've lost, by the mistakes you've made, or by the pain that has scarred you. Those things describe your experience. They do not define your essence. God sees beyond your suffering. He looks at the beauty that pain cannot erase. You may feel shattered, but he sees a vessel being reshaped. You may feel unworthy, but he sees a heart capable of immense love and compassion. Sometimes pain doesn't change how much God loves you. It changes how much you can love others. The same wounds that once broke you will one day become bridges of empathy and healing for someone else. There is a quiet strength in those who have suffered and still believe. People who have faced loss, betrayal, and heartbreak, yet refuse to grow bitter, carry something sacred within them. That resilience is not born from pride. It is born from divine companionship. God's presence in pain rewrites the meaning of worth. You are not valuable because life is easy for you. You are valuable because, even when life crushes you, you still rise, still hope. That is the evidence of God's image within you, a spirit that cannot be extinguished, even when everything else fades. When God looks at you, he doesn't see the weakness the world criticizes. He sees the endurance the world overlooks. Every moment you keep breathing through your suffering is a testimony that heaven is at work. Every time you choose kindness despite being hurt, forgiveness despite betrayal, faith despite uncertainty, he sees that. He does not weigh you by your moments of collapse. He treasures your moments of rising. Even when you fall apart completely, his love remains constant, surrounding you like the air itself. Silent but essential, unseen yet sustaining. The worth God places on you is eternal. It cannot be increased by your victories or decreased by your pain. When Jesus looked at the broken, he never turned away. He touched the sick, embraced the outcast, and called the weeping blessed. That same love defines your worth today. You are not the sum of your scars. You are the sum of his grace. The world values beauty, success, and composure. God values honesty, humility, and endurance. What looks like weakness to the world is often strength in the kingdom of heaven. So when pain tells you that you're less than enough, remember, your suffering is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of being alive in a world that is still being healed. Your pain is not punishment. It's participation in the process of becoming whole. God does not measure your worth by how clean your story looks, but by how faithfully your heart keeps beating through the mess. You are loved in your confusion, cherished in your sorrow, and held in your exhaustion. Nothing you endure diminishes your divine value. In fact, the very thing you think disqualifies you is often what qualifies you to experience God's love in its purest form. A love that does not judge your pain but embraces you through it, until every wound becomes a window through which his light shines. There comes a moment when you grow tired of running from pain. You realize that no matter how far you go, it follows, like a shadow that refuses to loosen its grip. You distract yourself, work harder, talk louder, pray longer, but still it lingers. That's when the truth begins to unfold. Healing does not come from escaping pain, but from allowing God to meet you within it. Transformation does not happen when you pretend you're fine. It happens when you finally stop pretending. When you stop running, when you stop hiding, when you whisper, "God, I'm tired." That's the moment heaven begins to move. There is a sacred kind of courage in surrender. The world teaches that strength means endurance without emotion, that to be unbreakable is to be powerful, but divine strength is born from surrender. When you allow God to see the real you, the version covered in scars, fear, and exhaustion, he does not recoil, he receives. He takes your pain into his hands and begins reshaping it into purpose. The transformation doesn't happen outside the fire, it happens within it. Because pain is not the enemy of transformation, it is the instrument of it. The very thing you thought would destroy you is often the thing that redefines you. Surrendering to pain in God's presence does not mean giving up. It means giving in to love, to grace, to trust. It is admitting that control was never the source of peace. Many people try to fight their suffering with denial, but denial only deepens despair. God calls you not to deny the pain, but to invite Him into it. You do not have to face the darkness alone. When you finally let Him in, the pain begins to lose its sting, because it is now shared. What once felt unbearable becomes bearable, not because it lessens, but because you no longer carry it alone. There is a kind of beauty that only suffering can create, the beauty of authenticity. When you've been through enough pain, you stop pretending. You stop judging others. You begin to understand that every person carries a story that cannot be seen. Pain softens you, it makes you kind, it teaches you empathy in a world that glorifies indifference. This is how transformation begins, not by removing pain, but by letting it teach you. Every heartbreak becomes a lesson in compassion. Every loss becomes a lesson in gratitude. Every failure becomes a doorway to humility. Pain is not a wall, it's a bridge that leads the soul back to truth. When God transforms pain, He does not erase your story, He rewrites it. The moments you thought would define you by defeat become testimonies of endurance. The nights you thought would never end become the soil where faith grows roots. Transformation is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet, sacred, and gradual. One day you realize that the same pain that once broke you now gives you wisdom. The same tears that once fell in despair now carry the light of understanding. You begin to see life differently. The edges of your heart, once sharp with fear, become soft with grace. It takes great trust to let God work through pain, because transformation demands honesty. It asks you to face your wounds without covering them up. But when you do, you discover that every scar becomes sacred. Every scar tells a story, not of defeat, but of divine involvement. God never wastes pain. Every hurt, every betrayal, every disappointment becomes material for transformation. The moment you stop running and let Him shape it, the pain begins to serve you rather than enslave you. What once felt like the end becomes the beginning of something deeper, something eternal. The process is not instant. There will be days you question everything, nights you doubt His presence. But transformation is not about speed, it's about surrender. Each time you choose trust over bitterness, each time you choose to pray instead of despair, the pain changes shape. It loses its power to define you and begins to refine you. Slowly, quietly, God turns what once wounded you into wisdom that strengthens others. You become a vessel of comfort, carrying light to those still lost in their own dark nights. When you allow God to meet you in your suffering, your tears stop being symbols of weakness. They become symbols of birth. Something new is forming. You may not see it yet, but deep within, your soul is expanding, your faith is stretching, your heart is learning to hold both sorrow and peace at once. This is transformation through surrender. The moment when pain no longer controls you, but shapes you into someone who reflects divine strength with quiet grace. The world will tell you to escape pain. God invites you to embrace Him through it, because only in that holy meeting place, where you stop running and allow yourself to be held, does pain lose its power. In that embrace, suffering is no longer just suffering. It becomes the sacred ground of transformation. You emerge not untouched, but reborn, softer, wiser, freer. And what once hurt you becomes the very proof that God was never trying to destroy you. He was trying to rebuild you from the inside out. There comes a point when you begin to see that not all pain ends in destruction. Some pain ends in redemption. God doesn't always remove the suffering you face, but He never lets it be wasted. Every ache, every unanswered prayer, every tear you thought fell into emptiness has purpose woven within it. Divine love doesn't always prevent pain, but it always redeems it. What you lose in comfort, you gain in depth. What you lose in certainty, you gain in faith. This is the mysterious exchange that God offers, not the avoidance of pain, but the transformation of it into something eternally meaningful. In your darkest hours, you may have thought that your pain was meaningless, that nothing good could ever come from it. But God sees further than you can. He doesn't judge the chapter you're in. He's already holding the entire story. While you cry over what was taken, He is already preparing what will come. Pain, in His hands, becomes clay. What looks like ruin is simply raw material being reshaped into grace. He redeems pain by turning it into wisdom, empathy, and strength. The kind of strength that doesn't boast, but comforts. The kind that knows what it means to fall, yet still rise with compassion. When you look back one day, you'll realize that the seasons of deepest sorrow were the ones that taught you the most about God's character. In joy, you learn gratitude. In suffering, you learn trust. It's easy to praise God when life is easy, but it's in the shadows that faith grows wings. That's where you learn that divine love is not fragile. It doesn't break under the weight of your tears. In fact, your tears water the ground of transformation. Each drop carries the potential for renewal, because God is the only one who can take the ashes of what broke you and breathe life into them again. There is something profoundly redemptive in realizing that your pain has purpose. It doesn't mean the hurt disappears. It means the hurt begins to heal differently. You start to see beauty in the places that once only brought grief. The same hands that allowed the breaking now shape the rebuilding. Redemption doesn't erase the scars, it sanctifies them. God doesn't cover them up. He turns them into testimonies. Those marks on your soul that once screamed Phiglia will one day whisper faith. What once reminded you of loss will one day remind you of how far love carried you. Pain is a great leveler. It humbles the proud, softens the harsh, and awakens the sleeping heart. Through pain, you discover that life isn't about control. It's about connection. You learn that joy is not the absence of sorrow, but the ability to find God in the middle of it. Redemption begins when you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" In that shift, pain changes its role. It stops being your captor and becomes your guide. And slowly, without you realizing, the same wound that once bled begins to glow with light. That is divine redemption at work. Pain transformed into purpose. The beauty of God's redemption is that it doesn't only restore, it multiplies. When He redeems your suffering, He doesn't just bring you back to where you were, He brings you further. You come out with more empathy, more patience, more gratitude. You start seeing others differently because you know what it feels like to be broken. And that understanding becomes sacred. You no longer look at pain as an enemy. You see it as a messenger that led you back to love. God redeems your suffering by using it to teach you how to comfort others. What once isolated you now connects you deeply to humanity. Every redeemed pain becomes a quiet sermon. Without words, your endurance speaks. Your scars become symbols of grace, proof that what was meant to destroy you only deepened your faith. God's redemption is not loud, it's subtle. It happens in the small moments, when peace returns after chaos, when laughter rises after tears, when you notice beauty again after long darkness. That's how divine healing works. It doesn't erase the memory, it changes its meaning. Pain no longer defines you, it refines you. And when that redemption finally reveals itself, you will realize something extraordinary. The pain that once made you question God is the very thing that now helps you understand Him. You will see that He never judged you for your suffering. He sanctified it. Every loss became a lesson. Every wound became wisdom. Every sorrow became soil for new joy. God's love is too powerful to let pain end in despair. It always ends in transformation. The very tears that once symbolized defeat will one day become your crown, evidence that divine redemption doesn't erase pain. It turns it into glory. When you finally look back over the path you've walked, the nights you thought would never end, the pain that felt too heavy to bear, the tears that blurred your vision, you will realize something holy. You were never alone. Every silent cry was heard, every wound was witnessed, and every ache was embraced by a love far greater than your understanding. God never judged you for breaking. He entered the breaking with you. He never turned away from your weakness. He turned your weakness into a doorway for His strength. Pain may have shaped you, but it did not define you. What defined you was how divine love met you within it, how grace quietly held you when you could no longer hold yourself. You were not abandoned in your darkness. You were being transformed in it. Every sorrow became a seed, every loss a lesson, every tear a thread in the tapestry of redemption. And now, what once felt like ruin has become the evidence of restoration. So walk forward, not ashamed of your scars, but aware of their sacredness. They are not reminders of failure. They are reminders of where God proved His faithfulness. You are living proof that pain can be redeemed, that broken hearts can still beat with purpose, and that divine love never condemns, it restores. Let your life be a quiet testimony of this truth. God doesn't judge you for your pain. He embraces you in it, heals you through it, and transforms it into the very story that will one day give others hope to believe again.